Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Bruce.
I'm your host, Pete.
And we are the Epic Experiment.
That we are. If you are new to the show, we talk about Magic the Gathering with a focus on mostly playtesting cards in Commander. And if you want to reach out to us, check out our show notes for our contact information. Let's get rolling. Bruce, I just wanted to take you down a trip to one of the more interesting conversations that I've sort of dove into. I was down a YouTube rabbit hole a while ago, and there's this really interesting podcast called Humans of Magic. This man interviews all kinds of incredible people, not just Magic pros or people that are well known, but he even interviews people like there's a small shop in Caldwell, Ohio, of all the places in this country and in North America. Middle of nowhere place. I have no idea where it is. All I know is it's east, like very far east of Columbus. Apparently, that store called Apex Gaming is one of the brightest spots in terms of tournament play and card store stuff. So I was really interested for that reason because it was in Ohio, but also there was some other stuff about like Sam Black and Kai Budd and some of these Brian Kibler. So check it out when you get the chance, Bruce. And I'll link the show for our 10 people that listen to us, and maybe they can enjoy it too. So, but it got me thinking about our style of play and deck building in general, because Commander is very unique in the facet for that. And one of the things that stuck with me is thinking about cards without, white or black assumptions, which I've already inherently done as a critical thinking kind of person. I've always been skeptical of the latest fad in a game and in life, and also just because I think it's good to think about deck building in general through a lens that it can constantly evolve and change, and there's no one size fits all answer, and that's what makes this game so amazing. A lot of pros do this when they go off meta with their decks in competitive play, but we can do it too with Commander. So basically, as we go through our little show today, I was just thinking about some cards that I wanted to feature that I am not a fan of, but that a lot of people play off EDH Rec.
I mean, this
so to start off,
some interesting fodder here. Okay, where are we going? Where are you taking?
The dragon fodder we got today.
All right,
we have some of the more popular mana rocks and sort of mana fixing things. We've got Commander Sphere, Mind Stone, Hedron Archive. So I just want to start with those three, but I have a small list. Those three kind of replace themselves. They're cards traditionally that you play on 2, 3, or 4, and basically it adds colorless mana, or colored mana in the case of Commander Sphere, and then you can sacrifice the card to draw a card or draw 2 cards. So basically, just as a very simple thing, a lot of the cards come in like Commander Precons now. So they're rather common. And they're in EDH Rec statistically they're played in an ungodly amount of decks. So I guess, Bruce, what is your experience with the cards? I've cut them immediately. I maybe played them once when I first started playing the game, but I abhor the cards. So I want to hear what you have to say first, and then I'll let you know what I think.
So of those first three, the only one I will play will be Mind Stone. I'm of the opinion that most 3-mana rocks or more mana need to be not just okay, they need to be terrific. And so Commander Sphere doesn't meet the bar as far as a 3-mana rock that does enough for me. Even if you can tap it for mana and still sack it for the card, that's not enough. It just isn't. Unless I have some way to loop it. Otherwise, it's not worth it to me. Hedron Archive, even more so. I cut that years ago. I have not played a Hedron Archive in probably 5 years. Mind Stone would be the one that I would still look at. But even then, the fact that it generates colorless mana to me is a drawback, and I would be more keen to cut it in favor of a rock that produces colored mana, as that's more likely to serve my needs in most cases. So I'm like you. I think these are probably I think these are overrated and played far too frequently. The fact that Commander Sphere is the 8th most played artifact and in over 750,000 decks on
Right.
EDHREC, which we know for a fact underreports the number of times because there are
100%.
so
Yeah.
many times that
So
card
many
just
decks that are not.
yeah
There are also so many
registered
decks that
anywhere.
probably play it that are not registered. Like I have a ton of decks that
Yeah,
are not registered. Um,
yeah,
but anyway, I think if you wanted to find a replacement, you could just play a land that you can sacrifice later. Like there are plenty of lands out there
mm-hmm.
you can come in tapped or come in untapped, and you can sacrifice them um, to draw a card or draw two cards. Like Cryptic Caves is one that I've seen. That's not
Mm-hmm.
terrible. It's basically a Mind Stone, but it's land. And you can sack it to draw a card only if you control seven or more lands, something like that.
I would
But
I would also add like things that like lands that cycle are also
oh,
similar in
for
that
sure.
vein.
That's good. Like
So
secluded step, like a lot of
yeah,
those cycles. So I think my theory is a lot of people play these cards if they're playing a deck that's trying to be greedy and trying to go from like 3 to 5 quicker because they have like big plays at 5 or they have big plays at 6 or whatever like
right.
that, or it's just a budget option, which is completely fine. Again,
Well, yeah.
none of these cards I would say go rip them in half, but it's just cards that I don't find that are necessary when you're playing in particular colors that have other options that are just better for your particular strategy. I think there are a lot of people, including me, like that will have a certain amount of cards that we throw them in every deck and we don't really think about it. And I think these are those kinds of
Mhm.
cards where you do
Yeah.
that and you should just cut them. And then there are other cards that like not to get too down into it, but like Wayfarer's Bauble, in my opinion, which and the um the elk, uh
Burnished Heart.
the Burnished Hart, yes. Those two are like you're trying to ramp out, but if you can only use it once, what's the point when you can just play a card that either makes you some treasures or if you have access to green, you just cut this completely because you have access to that ramp. I get it though
Right.
because there are certain decks that might need the extra 2 lands quickly in some
Right.
facet. Maybe you're playing some sort of storm deck that needs to get to 6 or 7. So on turn 6, you're going to sacrifice the Burnished Heart to get 2 basics out, or you're playing a 3 color or 4 color deck. I understand that limitation, but again, there we featured these budget lands last week. There are plenty of other relatively
Mhm.
fine options.
Right.
And shuffling the deck, I mean, there are other ways to kind of manipulate the top deck, so to speak, within a strategy. Like surveilling has become more prevalent, the manifest dread
Mhm.
sort of thing. There's other ways to do it where you're not going to completely flood yourself out, or in another. Because I think a lot of people used to play especially Burnished Heart, the prevent flooding and also to curve out in an effective way. Um, a lot of these
Yeah.
control decks have trouble with that, but I personally think there are ways to do it now. It's just a little bit easier to do it in those colors now than ever before.
Well, I
So
think what
what
I'm
do you
hearing
think
you
about
say is
that?
I think what you're saying is that it sounds like we should all play more lands in our decks instead of playing, and that we have lands that will do what we're looking them to do. Like if we're looking to play these rocks for card draw, we can. There are lands that will
You
do
might as
that
well
for us.
cut. Yeah, you might as well play like there's just several lands out there that you can sacrifice or you can use you can pay mana into later to do
Mhm.
something with. If you're gonna
Yeah.
slow roll a little bit, it doesn't hurt to just cut a
Yeah.
basic, play one of these non-basics that has some sort of effect that happens later. Again, that comes down to deck building in general. I mean, the average deck probably runs through 36 lands or 30 between 34 and 36 usually.
Yeah.
I would say, but it
So
doesn't
I'm.
hurt in that sense to run a cycle land instead of running one of these
Yeah. Yeah.
options. Um,
I would say that like I mean the only time the Wayfarer Bauble and the Burnished Heart get much play in my world is if I'm looping artifacts. Um,
sure.
so again, Megatron does it. Like I have a Megatron list that Megatron looks to recur Wayfarer's Bauble because you're in Mardu. You have a bit of a hard time ramping. Um, you can. This tends to be what Megatron wants to do. Same thing with Alesha, who smiles at death. Same sort of thing. Burnished Heart plays into that strategy reasonably well, so you can recur it and then sack it again to get more to pull more lands from your deck. Which like for every land you haul out of your deck, likely means you're going to be finding more of the things you want to do anyway. However, yes, in essence, I don't play these cards in every deck. I play them in very few, only in cases where I'm going to be looking to use them more than once. Because if it's going to be one and done, I don't want these. I'd rather play a land.
So my final caveat is they're like maybe if you're playing in a pod that is a bit slower and you can kind of take more game actions. This card is not a good card, but it might be better in a vacuum. It's Dungeoneer's Pack. It's the one where it enters tapped and then you pay 2, sacrifice it. You take the initiative, gain 3 life, draw a card, and create a treasure. You can only do it at sorcery speed. But if you're gonna like do one of these sorts of slower plays, you might as well just play that card. And that card is like 20 cents. But again, I'm not saying to go and like cut every single commander sphere and put this card in there because it's quite a slow card. But to gain that incremental value, it might be worth considering these types of effects. There are other ones out there that I can't remember right now off the top of my head. Like Dungeon Map is another one where it adds a color so you can be free to venture into the dungeon. Again, not many people like dungeons, and I get that too. But there's like the Clue Land from MKM that I'm thinking of right now as well.
Yes.
You can pay 1, sacrifice it.
Yes.
Or pay 2 to sacrifice it to draw a card. I think that's also nice. But again, there's so many other options, I think, and I think expanding that idea can be helpful. But not to beat a dead horse here, what is your first card for today?
I was looking around, and we've all encountered the cousin for this particular one because it was part of a cycle. So this is Dreamborn Muse. We're all familiar with Seedborn Muse, which is probably it has a reputation for being a very powerful card. But this is part of a cycle that they attached. This is some sort of effect to a creature that it happens at every upkeep. And so Dreamborn Muse, 2 blue for a 2/2. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts the top X cards from his or her library into his or her graveyard, or X is the number of cards in his or her hand. Which I think is a really interesting piece of text on a card. Now, Pete, what is your reaction to this one? Like, is this something where you think I maybe got some rose-colored glasses? I think this card is kind of neat. What do you think?
So the other 2 or 3 cards in the cycle are there's Seedborn Muse, which is very popular, right? Untap all permanents during each other player's untap step. Windborn Muse, which you mentioned, I think that's the propaganda on a creature. There's Graveborn Muse, which is for the zombie players, where you draw X cards, where it's the number of zombies you control. And then there's Lavaborn Muse, which is at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 2 or fewer cards in their hand, it deals 3 damage to him or her. Dreamborn Muse is interesting because, again, if you're like the self-mill player, you're going to consider this as a card because you're able to mill yourself and it doesn't hurt you as much. What I think the most... Because I remember seeing this card years ago when I first started, right? And it used to be annoying to play against because it was like a faux, like a fake stacks piece. For these sorts of games where you're relying on your top deck or whatever. But I'm thinking of it as like if you're playing Group Hug and you're making everybody draw like 4 or 5 cards a turn with like the various effects that happen at the upkeep. That's really neat because it's a different way to like stacks the team out, like the pod. And I'm also thinking about like again the obvious choice is playing like a Breach the Multiverse and taking advantage of that. But maybe you're playing this as a way to protect yourself from an aggro deck that is drawing all the nuts, all the gas. You might just play this kind of like a propaganda style effect, and you're encouraging people to dump their hand, so it actually makes the game go a little quicker. I'm not a huge fan of the card in general because I just don't think it's worthy of a slot for me. But maybe someone else will find a way to use it in a creative way, beyond just the self milling or milling your opponents out. strategy. What do you think?
Right. Well, I mean, I looking at it from the standpoint of like the self mill. I mean, the fact that you're going to accidentally catch strays by getting your opponents could be useful. But to me, the thing that I'm interested in is the self mill. This would be going in my CDC Brute Tyrant deck, and I think that self mill strategy is particularly potent when you have powerful effects to allow you to recur, or you have dredge style stuff that you're going to be looking to turbo into play. And I think it appears in 13,000 decks, so it's not like it's a small number. But
Right.
the card has been printed. It was in, I don't even know what set that's from, like originally printed in. It was a long time ago. Um, but to me, this is the sort of card that people sleep on, and it's been in the format for call it 15, 20 years, and people go, well, I don't know about that. And I think this has a very potent effect that we overlook because the other cousin, Seedborn Muse, catches all the attention. Right? This is the rest of that cycle gets downplayed. We don't really know about it, even though it does some really powerful stuff. So I think I wanted to highlight it tonight, particularly for all those mill players out there, and I know it's a very popular strategy. It's hard to pull off because of the fact that milling everybody out for a full three full decks is tough, but it is another tool that's in your arsenal that you can play. Might not catch too much flack compared to something like some of the more egregious mesmeric orb is like something that like people just find miserable to play against. This might be something that is less miserable but still advances your game plan to the point where your mill deck can get things done. Personally, I like it for a self milled strategy. That tends to be something that I like to do extensively. So that's my own personal
I would love
proclivity.
to see this in like is it spell slinging like deck where you're playing one of the flashback Mizzix mastery thing and you're like actually being really greedy with putting cards in your hand. Like I think that would be interesting because you could potentially flash back cards to keep your engine going. So maybe that's a potential option. The Simic like roll knock is a neat card in general, but using the Dreamborn
Yes.
Muse to do it that way is interesting. Um, but again, yeah, I mean, it stays in its lane. It's a card that, you kind of know what to
Yeah.
expect from it, and that's not a bad
Yes.
thing. I mean,
No.
that's just something that we really can't argue with in terms of its applicability. And
Yeah.
yeah, this next card, I'm not sure if this is applicable anywhere, but it's from Stronghold, so it's cool, right? It's called Scapegoat. It's 1 white, it's an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, and then you return any number of target creatures you control to their owner's hand. So what do you
Hmm.
think?
So this would allow you to reset a bunch of powerful end of the battlefield triggers, and bring them back to your hand fairly inexpensively. Like let's say, I'm just like if let's say you have a creature that you're playing this in a red white deck, and you have a creature that generates a couple of extra tokens, or it makes a blood token, or maybe makes a treasure or something, a thopter. You could return those to your hand by sacrificing something innocuous, bring a bunch of things back to your hand to be able to re-trigger them. It also could allow you to break out, like somebody is playing like an Imprison in the Moon effect, or um oh, maybe that doesn't work because that turns it into a land. Um, but some sort of like a pacifism effect or something that renders your creature inert. And now you could break that out by having, not that people play a lot of that strategy, but there are people out there who play pacifism effects because they appear quite prominently in most limited strategies. They do migrate over to commander. So I like this as a way. Also, is a great way to protect yourself from a board wipe. So you sacrifice a token and then return all your valuable creatures to your hand, so that they're board wiping the junk that you don't care if it dies. The tokens, the stuff that you don't need, but you can return your most salient pieces to your hand for a single white mana and sacrificing something derpy or innocuous. So I think I like this as a pretty like this was I think sort of like the way that white played before they got to Fairy's Protection.
Right.
And this is like a much a budget friendly and then much cheaper to cast because it's a single white mana. And how many times have people looked at your board state, looked at the single white mana you had up, and you say, "Darn it, Pete's got a Swords of Plowshares in hand," and so they're like, "Well, we're not going to try and play into that. We're going to do something else." And you're like, "Ha ha, fools! Catch this! Boink, yoink, bounce all your things." The next thing you know, you're going to go off to the races on your next turn. So I like this effect. I think this is actually really, really strong. And people, may not know about it. I don't even know. I don't think I've ever seen this card played. I don't even know what it be played in. It is played in not very much. Good grief. Pete, I like this card. This is really sweet. Tell me, like, what were you thinking with this one? Where did your evil brain go with this?
I was thinking like a classic blue-white control deck, with like Brawl, like Baron, like just when rewarding yourself for returning things back to your hand, kind of like the bounce, like bouncing and recycling
Yeah,
cards to your hand, replaying them
yeah.
for cheap. And then I was also thinking like an aggro, like a traditional like Boros beatdown deck or something, where you built up like that Voltron commander, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just beating everybody with it, and then they go to try to kill it, and then you save it by killing off a, I don't know, let's say like a
Something else. Something else.
like something cheap.
Yeah.
Um, I like, actually, this would be really cool in Hoffrey,
Yes.
because you can sacrifice like one of the creatures, because Hoffrey would I guess still see it as an additional cost,
Yeah.
and then you can choose the targets to bounce. That's kind of I really love Hoffrey. I think that card is awesome. It's just a really neat way to play Boros. But
Yes.
anyway,
I think Hoffrey's
so
really
that's what
interesting.
I was thinking. I was
Yeah.
thinking like
Yeah.
this
I like that.
sort of bounce sort of thing where you're um you're the man and you got the one card standing alone and you're trying to keep that alive, or
Is
yeah.
is this because you're building Gandalf the White Rider?
No. Of course not.
No,
Although the
never, never.
artifact creature is pretty cool. Bringing
I
back
think.
all your Phyrexian walkers and Memnites back to your hand is kind of cute.
Well, it's the pure steel paladin might be down with it too. Anyway, no, I really like this. I think this is a really neat effect. I'm pretty down, and it
Right.
only
What do you
appears
got?
in like 3,500 X. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I want to try it out in something. I'm just not sure what yet. So
Right.
yeah, it'll be cool. Alrighty,
All
what
right.
do you got for us?
This next one is a cautionary tale. So there's a story. I was playing with some friends last week, and one of the games, one of the guys pulled out Edgar Markov. So Mardu vampires. I was thinking to myself, holy boy, I'm not sure if I'm quite ready for that, but okay, we're gonna do Edgar vampires here. And towards the tail end of the game, the Edgar deck is kind of struggling to keep the cards going and make headway. And my opponent resolved this card. And I had to stop and really scratch my head, and I read it 2 or 3 times. So this is Null Profusion. 4 black. Enchantment, skip your draw step. Whenever you play a card, draw a card. Your maximum hand size is 2. Now, I stopped for a second. I looked at it. I'm like, I've seen this card before, but in green. So this is a color shifted version of Recycle. And
All right.
I had to say, like, this card in an Edgar Markov strategy doesn't really pan out, because I said to him, like, right away, I'm like, you're in the wrong colors to do this. Like, the green one works, Recycle works, because in green, when you start playing stuff, as you hit a land, you often have enough ways to play additional lands that you don't get stuck. Unfortunately, if you're playing Edgar Markov, it's hard for you to play extra lands on the top of your deck, so eventually you're inevitably going to get stuck. I understand the theory behind it. This is the same text as Flubs the Fool, right? Flubs the Fool has this line of text on it too, and Flubs goes, you play a thing, you get to draw a card. But this doesn't work in Edgar Markov in this way. So I was kind of the opinion that this was not probably the right inclusion in his list. That there were other enchantments that would have been better suited for his deck to keep cards being accrued and allow him to continue his advance his game state rather than just getting stuck. Because he'd run out of cards. He just run out of things. I draw land, play a land, draw a land. I'm stuck. Like now what are you doing?
So this is neat because yeah, it didn't fit in that particular deck, but boy, there's a very diverse amount of commanders that actually play this card, and that's really cool. So you've got like everything from Blim Comedic Genius, which donates quote unquote bad permanents to other players, and you've got everything from that to Enchantress builds. Muldrotha is thrown in there. Torwaki the Younger, which is a really cool card. It's the Rakdos version of Fire Song and Sunspeaker, where you like whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get to deal damage to things. Yeah, there's just a lot of interesting things people are doing with the card. So I guess I wouldn't put it in the good category. I'd put it in the ugly category because it has so much restriction that makes it ironically so flexible. It's like it's so restrictive on one end that it actually expands the potential for it on another side. So I think it'd be cool to see like what people are doing with it, beyond just the typical landfall sort of ripping stuff off the top. But I'm curious to see like what people could do with it beyond what is potentially there already. Because of the fact that like if you're able to shuffle your deck enough times, you might be able to keep going. And I think that would be fun to see somebody do it at least once and then put it away. So
I think of all the cards here, and I think I see it here, like this card only appears in less than 2,000 decks. But Damia, the Sage of Stone, I think would be the place where I would like, and probably why it appears in there more than anywhere else, is that Damia doesn't care about your draw step. It just says just checks to make sure you don't have 7 cards. Oh, you don't have 7 cards. Let's fill your hand up. And now you've gone around the restriction that null profusion is stuck on you. So I mean, I think the card is interesting. Like I did not tell the guy that this is a bad card. I just said like I don't think this works in the strategy you're trying to play it in, because I know what you want to do. You want to storm off. In a perfect world, you storm off with a bunch of vampires, and next thing you know, we're swimming in bloodsuckers, and we're all going, "Uh-oh, this is a problem." And Edgar's happy. But the reality is, in most cases, he's going to get stuck because he can't clear the deck of enough stuff to keep the chain of cards going. So, it just speaks to the need to stop and critically analyze what the card is being played for, because I think this is
the idea was in a good place. Like his idea was in a good place, but the execution for trying to make it possible just didn't get there. But it's good that like this guy's thinking outside the box, and I in terms of what he can play. So that's pretty solid.
And it's very budget friendly. You can't criticize him for like he didn't play. He wasn't trying to go put a Phyrexian or like something expensive in there. Like Phyrexian Arena is not that expensive anymore, but like there's lots of other options that exist that are far more pricey. This is under $1. It is, and could be potentially very powerful. So, I mean, I thought it was pretty neat inclusion. I just like I could see the dilemma this is going to encounter almost immediately. I'm like, you're going to get stuck, and sure enough, he got stuck. Like he played 2 vampires and then he got jammed.
No, it makes sense. I mean, it's something to consider, and like this next card, I think also has something to be considered with regards to where it could fit. Because it might not fit in every pod, but I think it's a really nice political card in a color that's not really known for being political. So this is Volcanic Offering. It's 4 colorless and red. It's from Commander 2014. It's an instant: destroy target non-basic land you don't control, and target non-basic land of an opponent's choice you don't control. Volcanic Offering deals 7 damage to target creature you don't control, and 7 damage to target creature of an opponent's choice you don't control. So what do you think?
Wow. Wow. So, on some level, I recognize I probably don't want to spend 5 mana for this effect. But I like this card because, okay, we often have commented on the fact that we need to blow up, like, there are lands out there that just need to die. All right. And this was a surefire way. It allows you to hit their, I don't know, their glacial chasm, their, I don't know, their whatever, the one that makes the zombies out of nowhere. There's all of these lands that out there that are really powerful things, and this kills them dead. All right, and the fact that then it's like it forces somebody else to target another player, not you, I think is super interesting.
Yeah.
Very political and really intriguing.
So
Now, if you look at it from the standpoint of Stone Rain, which is this effect for killing a land, is 3 mana. Okay. You're getting, so you get a stone, you get basically double Stone Rain. You just don't control where the second one goes. And then you turn around and nuking something for 7 is probably at least 5 mana in and of its own. And again, if I read this right, they can't target damage to a target creature of an opponent's choice.
you
Don't
can't
control.
choose anything that's they can't the whole spell, it doesn't choose anything that you control.
Of yours. Yeah. So you just can't control the second half of the spell. So if I would spend 3 mana on a Stone Rain to get Pete's land, and I would spend 5 mana to deal 7 damage to Pete's creature, just if that was all the card read, I would probably spend it happily. The fact that the second half of it, that if you can, now I give Pete control over it, and he's going to get George's things or Nick's things, I'm pretty okay with this. So I think, and at instant speed, I like this card a great deal, thinking this could be really impactful. Like this is a 4-for-1 on a card. Like that's what that says. It's 4-for-1, and it's for 5 mana. Like, yes, please. I think in most cases we would take it in almost every situation. So I think this card is like on rate is very good. The only dilemma we encounter is the fact that we don't control the other half of it. And you just got to be okay with that.
Well, no, it literally, like, the spell says that, like, you choose a target, your opponent chooses a target that can't be your stuff.
Yours, exactly.
Right. So, like, I was looking at just removal in general for red, because red is very lean on that stuff in general. It's all land destruction. People don't like that stuff. But this is good because, in my opinion, because it creates that political sort of dilemma of, like, what's the most threatening thing right now on the board that needs to be taken care of?
Yep.
For me, for that other guy, whatever. And yes, it blows up a land, it blows up 2 lands. But they're probably lands that have been overused in that game, like the Growing Rights of Itlamok flipped, or
Right.
A Hall of Heliod's Generosity, or something else that gives, like, Trample or Rogue's Passage, which is a perfect example.
Oh yeah.
Because many people will play Rogue's Passage just because they can. Yes. And you're right. The rate is very good, and I think it's not expensive. It deals 14 damage total for 5 mana. That's and it's at instant speed too. A lot of these effects are usually at sorcery speed anyway. There's a lot of commanders that like this kind of thing. Like, Imodane just nukes the entire board.
Oh yeah.
Or like there are cards that are rewarded for when things hit the graveyard. There's many commanders that care about when permanents hit the graveyard that are red plus another color. Torwaki the Younger. It makes this a 14 mana, gain 14. Gain more than that, actually. So you gain, like, I think it's like 16 or 18 because he deals 2 damage. But anyway, I like it because, again, it's political. Commander should be political, in my opinion, because that's like the half of the game. And it swings the game in a way that you're not exactly sure of where it's going to go after that. And I like that. I like that. So, anyway, to wrap this up, what is the last card that you got today for us?
Okay. So, folks, my two children, my two boys, they're 11 and 9. They are starting to get into playing Magic a little more seriously, and they've commented on the fact that they like to play. One of them built Lathril and wants to build an Elves deck. Well, the classic finisher of an Elves deck is they go and find a Craterhoof Behemoth and go and smash the table. The problem with Craterhoof Behemoth, it's like a $45 card, and so that's not really feasible for my 11-year-old son to play with. What is feasible is this card. So this card is Demolisher Spawn. It is 5 green for an enchantment creature horror. It is from the Duskborn Commander product. It is trample and haste, and it's a 7/7. So it's a big old thing. And here's the part I like. Whenever Demolisher Spawn attacks, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, other attacking creatures get +4/+4 until end of turn. So it's not a Craterhoof Behemoth. Let's be real. But oftentimes +4/+4 is enough that turns your 1/1 into a 5/5. That's hitting like a Mack truck. And it's probably repeatable. So, and at this sort of price tag, Pete, like, am I wrong? Like, am I being overly optimistic? I think Delirium is pretty realistic to hit.
So I was just looking at, like, if I was playing a budget deck, I would be playing like a mono green stompy deck with it, and I would be playing Goreclaw because I would just win the game.
Oh, yes.
Because the attack trigger happens at the same time, so Goreclaw gives everything +1/+1 in trample, and this creature has haste, so when it attacks, it gives everything +4/+4. Everything is power 4 or greater. Basically, you could just kill the whole table, and I think that's awesome. The fact that it's continuous and the thing itself has a bunch of good evergreen keywords, trample and haste. Like, there's so many things you could do with it to abuse it. Like, you could keep it in the graveyard and make a token copy of it with like Feldon or something and beat the table down with it.
Or that abyssal card.
Yeah. The abyssal, the one that from Foundations.
That
makes a token copy of it. It might non-bow with the Delirium, but Delirium is not too hard to accomplish these days.
No.
There's you could even run it in like a deck that creates a bunch of small 1/1s or 2/2s, like a Simic deck, right? You could use it as a finisher in a Simic deck. You could use it in a finisher of some sort of, I don't know, Abzan pile, if you really wanted to. Yeah. And I think the fact that it is also an enchantment creature is great. It might get hit by double the removal, but it buffs all of your, like Enchantress builds, sometimes they have trouble finishing the game. Yeah. It might be just a way to finish the game that way too, because it's an enchantment and it makes everything thicker.
Right. Well, with that said, I think we need to wrap it up here because I also hear my little daughter calling for daddy because she's not feeling super duper tonight. So, Pete, thanks very much. Audience, thank you very much for bearing with us tonight. Let's get us out of here, Pete. How do we get out of here?
Yeah, so if you like what you're hearing, we'll link stuff to the show notes, and we have that link for Humans of Magic. Check them out. They're great. See you all next week, and take care, everybody.
Thanks very much. Take care, folks. Talk to you later.